Welcome to this YCP marketing tutorial. As we continue on here making our email, we've set up our email, we've picked our recipients, we've picked a template, and now we're ready to really design the email. So before we do that, let's look at the 4 areas of the design here. This first area here, as it says here, is just for a little teaser of content, just the first sentence or so that'll show up in like an email browser that you might see in your list of emails. And so we can put something short in here, and we'll do that in just a second. The second section here is to just a section with a link to view it in a browser. So if it's not looking right in your email browser, you might click it and open it up in a web browser. And so SilkStart provides that automatically. The next section, of course, is your main content. This is where you'll put your pictures and your links and things like that. And then lastly, down at the bottom, we have the footer, which has some built-in information about your chapter, emailing address, and so forth. If you remember back to the first video, you'll remember that there's a place in settings where you can change some of this information. And lastly, at the very bottom, we have our unsubscribe and notification preferences buttons, which you want to have in your emails. So let's change a little bit of the content here, and then we can begin jumping into this. So you notice we have some basic content in now, and we want to put some new content in. So notice as we hover over between different content sections, say at the top or bottom, we get this red line to appear. And this actually gives us an option to insert a new section of our document. So if we click that, you'll see it opens up another section here where we can type. And say I want to have some big text, I can go over here and click on, say I want the heading, and say I want to include maybe a couple pictures of like famous YCP members. So I can look, say, maybe see some famous YCP members. And I think maybe I want to center this. And then I can say, maybe below that, maybe below the pictures, I want just a link to join now or something like that. So now notice here the background is a different color, and I want it really just to match this white background that we have here. So the way I can do that is I can highlight both of these things, and then I can come up here and click the Create Div Container button, which brings these together into a single div in HTML. You don't really need to know exactly what that is, but it basically just it's its own section. And if I go over to Advanced, I can set, say, the background color. Now, if I can click here, do Special Container, and I'll set a few things. But if I just want to set, say, maybe the background to white, I can just literally type the word background with a semicolon. And then if I want the color white, I can provide the hex color, and white in hex is 6 Fs. Black will be 6 zeros, and then all the other colors are going to be in between those in hexadecimal. And so I click that and see now we've got a white section here, which is great. And say, as I said earlier, I want to put a couple pictures of members in between these two pieces of text. So a great way to do that is you can, of course, insert images, but if I want to arrange multiple images, I'll probably want to do that in a table. So if I go up here to click the table button, I can insert a table, and I can select lots of different settings here, but I don't really need to touch many of these. I can just set 1 row and then 2 columns. If I click that, it creates a table. Now notice it's very small at first, but if I begin adding content, it'll actually grow in size. So if I go over here, if I want to put an image in, we're here on the left, if I can click the Upload Images button, and if I scroll down, I can input an image of, say, a famous YCP member of the past. So here's one. We had Legolas was a member. And so I can input him as a member, and then I can go back and maybe add another one to the template as well. And so let's look at here, Luis Molina. And so now we've got both our pictures. But of course, when we send this email out, we want them to be similarly sized, really the same size. And so let's go through and see how we can fix this issue. Well, the first thing is that these are not even the same dimension, right? This image here is tall, it's vertically oriented, and this other one is horizontally oriented. So we want to fix that. And you can do that in SilkStart. If I click here on the, go back to that image that I selected. And what I'm doing now, by the way, if I select this image, and then I click here, any image I select here is going to replace that. So if I go back to the original one, notice there's an option over here to both to align the image that's within its container, so if I want it to be left aligned, center, right. And then there's also an option to edit it. So let's select that. And what we can do here is we can crop the image to fit a certain ratio, a certain aspect ratio. So say I want a 16:9 ratio. I can drag this box to select what part of the image I want to keep and then apply it. And now I've cropped my image down, and now it's 16:9 in ratio. And then you can see it over here. It creates a new image up here. You can see I've been editing a few. And so now here's the new dimensions. It's 542 by 304. The original one, as you can see down below, was 542 by 560. So different dimensions there because we cropped it. And now actually it's a lot closer in size. But of course this image isn't quite 16:9 as well. So if I edit it, if I go back here to the original one, I can do the exact same thing, or I can do other things as well. But let's do 16:9 on this guy, apply and save, and then we'll come back out and we'll see that our image are still differently sized. That's because these images were differently sized to begin with, and so even when we made them the same proportion, they are differently sized. So if you look here, when you edit an image, it saves it to as the most recent image. So we've got a bunch here. You can always delete images that you make very easily. And so let's delete these and make this a little bit cleaner since I've been playing around with this a bit here. So you can see the dimensions here: 425 by 239. These are 542 by 304. So the height, so this is width by height, right? So the height on Legolas here is greater than the height on Luis Molina, and so that's why the cell is going to size. Is going to fit him better because it's going to size to the larger of the two images. So, but it is important to note, right, that these are the same proportion. So this ratio and this ratio are the same or very close because we have to get down to only 1 pixel. So here is an example of where we might go into source code and edit things to make these the same. So if you have images that are the same size, that's going to work great. But if you ever have images that are different sizes and you're really struggling, you may just want to go into source code and edit that. And you might think source code is a little overwhelming, but let me show you a good way to go into that. So you see here in our email, just look at the content. We've got a heading that's called See Some Famous Members, and then we've got a Join Now. And so if we go into source code, there's a lot of stuff here that may look unfamiliar. But starting from the bottom, notice it starts from the bottom, which is good because up at the top here, this is all SilkStart pre-provided HTML to set the styling. So if we just go from the bottom here, we can say this is the footer, right? There's some comments here in the HTML. This is the footer. And then notice we've got, see, end of the body here. We can see some of the things we just talked about. Look, we have an H1, a header, which says see some famous YCP members. Oh, and that's above our pictures, which was in a table, as you can see here. And notice below that we have join them now. And so we can see, oh, well, our table is actually with our pictures is in between those two items, which of course is right here. So we can see that these are the two images. We've got an image here pulled in. Again, you don't need to understand all of the code here to do this, but you can see here the images are sized. It's sizing just to 100% width. That's going to make them as big as the container can hold. And the height is just going to be auto, so it doesn't change the proportions. But you can see here the width of Legolas is 542 and then 425. And since these are the same proportion, and since the height is changing proportionally, I can actually just change the height of the one image to 425 to match the other, and then they will actually look the same. So now the images actually match nicely here, and so we've got a good table. So that section actually looks pretty good. I've got a blank space here. Maybe I want to leave that, maybe I don't. But I do want to change the color of these headers. So I can select them, and then I can click the color tool up here. And say I want to make them with a YCP blue. I can enter a hex color, which is 405A6 for YCP, and I can make it a nice blue. And here, again, I join them now. This is really a call to action, so I actually want to link that. So if I click the chain up here, I can enter a link. And say I want it to take them to the Young Catholic Professionals join page, which is youngcatholicprofessionals.org/join. That's where they can sign up to become a member. I can select that, and then when they click this, it will take them to that page. It also changes the color of the text. You can continue to edit that as well if you want. But we'll just leave the purple for now. So that's great. So we've got our pictures here, and it looks good. And we notice we've got this a line dividing our section. But up here at the top, I have a blank section here about a YCP member testimony. So say I wanted to include that. And again, maybe I wanted this time put a picture of a member next to maybe a quote or something like that. So let's use a table again. by inserting one. And again, we can do 1 row and 2 columns. Tables are pretty straightforward. And say I can begin typing here on the right, my quote, and I can type all sorts of things here. And then on the left, if I go back over and scroll over to the left, I can insert my image. So let's do that, and we'll come back in a second. So you see we've got a quote from a member here. And you can see that it's not really aligned particularly well. The right side of this table is much longer than, it's much wider than the left, but we want these to be a little more equally spaced. But we've got a lot of space at the top and bottom of this cell. So if we can simply press the return key here and make a new line that cuts the width of our text, and then the table resizes automatically. So if I want to do that again, maybe, and we can see here now I've got 3 lines of text, but it actually looks pretty good. These look to be pretty evenly sized. And so now I've got a good quote here. And again, as you can see, we can edit the colors of text and styling and things like that to make it look a little bit better, make it pop a little bit more. And lastly, I think we want to add a button right here to encourage people to join. So we've got our content here, we've got our quote, we've got our pictures. It looks not too bad, but say we want to include a button. We can do that by clicking this button link right here. And this allows us to insert a button. We can set the style of the button, and here we want to set, this is going to affect the colors of what the button looks like. So we can play with this, but let's select the primer button, and let's click make another call to action, join now. We want this to be a pretty large button. And then for a URL, we can say it once again, go to youngcatholicprofessionals.org/join. And we put that in. We can see it's aligned to the left here. So if we align this in the center, and we can notice that the button has certain colors. So when we hover over it, it goes to the primary YCP colors, that dark blue and then the white. But if we click on the button and go back up to the button settings here, we can also change it to maybe a warning button, or it's in yellow. We can change it to different things like that. So these are just going to affect the colors of the button. So we just added another one over here for testing for a second here. But again, there's different kinds of buttons. So there's success, which will be, I think, in green. Yep. And then primary, link, and so forth. So if we go back to our primary here, that's this blue color. And so that is going to affect the really just the color. You can adjust the size, and then of course adjust the link as well. But so now we've got buttons, we've got pictures, we've got our tables, and this email is getting ready to send. And so we'll go to the next part of the tutorial to finish this off.